channel. Today, as you can see by the title, we're going to go over all of the books I read in October and a couple of the books that are not quite yet finished but nearly done. So I just wanted to include them in this video because I will hopefully, fingers crossed, be finishing them in October. Most of these books were on my anticipated TBR list for October that I made. Some of them were not. I kind of went off script a little bit, but I was able to accomplish every book I had on my TBR list, at least getting them all started, 2 almost done, and one of them that I actually didn't even get an opportunity to start yet. I'm hoping I will be able to, but it doesn't look like that will be the case, but I'll make sure to put that in at the end of the video so you can see at least which book it is, and it will just be moved to probably my November TBR of books that I need to read. So, without further ado, let's get into this glorious stack of books that I read in the month of October. All right, so in the month of October, I ended up DNFing 3 books. This isn't something that I like to do. Unfortunately, this month, these books, I couldn't get through them. I mean, for different reasons for each of them, but like, they were just not going to get finished. I don't know if in time I might revisit it, but I completely doubt that I will. And the first book that I completely DNF'd, that I absolutely hated, if I could give it no stars, you know what, I can give it no stars. But if on Goodreads, I could rate it with like negative stars, I would do that. And that book, unfortunately, do not come for me in the comments, is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I hated this book. First of all, when you open the book and begin reading, the font is so tiny, you need literal like a magnifying glass that freaking sees the Hubble telescope in space in order to read this, you know, this font. Secondly, you know, I was trying to get into more, you know, psychological thrillers after reading The Silent Patient and Verity, thinking like this would be a good book to start with. It's really highly rated. People love this book. Let me give it a chance. You know, a movie's been made on this book, all of these things. And I literally think I got to like, it wasn't even far, maybe like 150 pages in, and I already knew what was going to happen. I already knew that at the end of the book, what was going to happen. I already knew everything, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, especially if some of you guys are really excited to read this book, but I figured it out literally like 150 pages into the book, maybe even less than, more like probably like 115 pages into the book. I was able to figure out what the ending was going to be, and it was eating away at me because it pissed me off to think that I read this book to have that happen. I don't know. I just kind of feel, you know what? If you are reading this book, skip a little bit so that you don't get any spoilers, because you know what? I'm going to have to give a little bit because it really irked my soul. But the fact that she is going to pretend to be hidden, to pretend to be kidnapped, to piss her husband off, irks me. It like gets underneath my skin so deep that like this book literally pissed me off, and I had to stop reading it. And I wasn't sure that that was the ending. I asked my mom, who has also read the book and was able to, or not read the book, but watched the movie, to ask her if that's how it ended, and she said yes. And I was just livid. I think it's just nasty to be a person who just wants to like annoy your husband, or just be that type of woman to like pretend to be kidnapped just to wreak havoc. I just thought that's just a really nasty thing. And yes, if the roles were reversed and a husband did it to his wife, same thing, or like a daughter to their parents, or a son to his parents, or a friend to a group of friends. I think the idea of pretending to be kidnapped and to make people anxious and nervous about it just to get underneath their skin or to prove a point, I think that is just a really stupid thing. And that bothered me. And maybe that was supposed to be like the psychological twist. You find out she's not actually kidnapped. She did it like on her own to be funny. It just annoyed me, and it wasn't something that I enjoyed. It is not a book that I recommend in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, let me know down in the comments what you guys thought about this book, if you read it, if you liked it, if you did not like it. I guarantee there are many people who love this book. There are many people who love this book. I don't know how many don't, but I am definitely one of the ones who does not. Yeah, it just didn't do it for me at all. Yeah, I hated this book, unfortunately. And then next, I guess we can go to another DNF book, which I will post a picture right here. And that book is Cabin 13 by, I'm looking down here on my iPad, AJ Rivers. Oh gosh, I had high hopes for this. I was listening to this on Audible. It seemed interesting enough. I liked the idea of it. I listened to maybe nearly half of the book. I had to return it and get my credit back. She was so wordy and so overly descriptive. Now I get it. You want descriptions when you're reading a book, especially if you're listening to a book, just so you can visualize what you're seeing. But she was so wordy until it was like, if this was a written book, if I had the physical copy, it'd be 1,000 pages. You didn't know like what the issue was with the guy that she was like certain to fall for, like after like one day of knowing him. You didn't understand what his issue was. I feel like the romance was moving way too fast. It was too wordy, way too descriptive. I don't know. I despised it. I think if the description and wordiness could have been brought down, I definitely think it would have been a book I would have been interested in. Maybe I'll give it another shot. Maybe if I like get the physical copy of the book, maybe that'll help. But the audio version of the book, I just despise. And then the third book that I DNF'd this month was The Old Woman and the Knife by, I cannot pronounce his name, but you will see it on the photo right here that says what his name is. But basically it's about an older woman who is an assassin who's been doing it for like 40 years. She works for this organization who, does it. She gets, files sent to her of certain people she has to kill, and she's starting to get sloppy in her old age. And deciding whether or not she needs to like retire, or people are wanting her to retire. Is she going to lose her job? Is she going to get caught? I thought the book is interesting. The problem that got me, I was nearly done, but the problem that got me with this book, and this was also an audiobook, is that the narrator, I couldn't stand her. I mean, I listened to her for a good chunk. I see what she was trying to do with the way that she spoke and the different tones of voices she would use. It's just that it was so dramatic and so over the top, trying to portray something that it took away from the goodness of the story kind of for me. I definitely think that I will get the book in a physical copy and try reading it again, and maybe my views on that will change. But yeah, that was also a book I DNF'd this month. Unfortunately, I really don't like doing it, but it just was a waste of time listening to something when I could, focus on something else. And then the next book that I am almost done with, that I have been listening to in Audible this month, is Cloud Cuckoo Land. Like I mentioned in my last video, this is a really awesome book that follows the life of 5 or 6 different people who are encountering this story written by Antonio Diogenes about, I can't remember what his name is, but it's just about a man who turns himself into a donkey, who gets turned into these different animals in this hopes of becoming this magical bird who can fly into the world in the sky called Cloud Cuckoo Land. And it just talks about how each of these people interacts with this story in different times of their life. Like there's a person who is like several hundred years into the future in space who's interacting with the story. There's someone in 2020, someone in 2014. There is someone interacting the story during, like, I believe the Korean War. There's someone interacting with the story who is in, 2 people actually in Constantinople during the time of the war. One of them who is within the city, one of them who is in the army trying to overtake the city. So it's just really interesting to get the varying viewpoints in the story, to understand how this story is impacting so many different lives in different time frames. And it's really, really interesting. And it's definitely a book that I'm going to buy the physical copy for. Then the next book that I read and actually really liked, I believe I gave it 4 stars, is The Library of Legends by Janie Chong. And this is a really, really good book. It is a fantasy book with a little bit of romance, very much YA, and it follows a university during the war in China when during the rape of Nanking, like when Japan comes and overtakes China and different parts of the country. And this university is given the task to protect the Library of Legends, which is basically all of the Chinese mystical legends and theories and just their knowledge that they really don't want the Japanese to get a hold of. So the university has the different books of this Library of Legends and is traveling it throughout China to a specific point to be, put away and hidden within this cave. All the while, there are these gods who are watching over them who are now fleeing because they believe that their time is done in China. And you just kind of get a little bit of an inside scoop of how that intertwines with the university. Why are the gods, making themselves known? And I think it's a really fun story. I think the romance in it is really nice, super sweet, super simple. I think it can get slow. I find she can be kind of repetitive, but once you get into it and you give it an opportunity, the book is really good. So I would highly recommend this book, and it was really fun to read. It took me a little bit to finish it because of how slow, but once I got done, I was excited that I read it, and I almost wished there was a little bit more to it. But there's that book. Then, obviously, I read the Winds of Martell. I'm looking forward to book number 2, which is currently out of stock on Amazon. But this is in my last video in my ultimate favorite books, my 5-star books. I love this book. It is a paranormal sci-fi book. And if you want a little bit more insight on that, you can get to my previous video, and I'll make sure to link that in the description box for you guys. But yeah, I read this one, as well as the Excursion to Tindari, which is also linked in my previous video of my ultimate 5-star reads, which follows a detective who is working to solve a crime with 3 different leads that all intertwine into one major crime. And I think it's really fascinating. It definitely reminds me of if you ever watched CSI Miami or any of those, or let's say The Blacklist, for example, on Netflix, those type of series where it's you think it's just one singular case that is you're focusing on, but really it's this huge secular thing all interconnected. And that's definitely what this book portrayed. I think the writing was beautiful. But yeah, this is a fantastic book, and I highly recommend you read it. Next, I read Shatter Me, the first book in the Shatter Me series. This was fantastic. This is such an anticipated read for me. This was something that I've been recommended just so much. I'm so glad that I actually got an opportunity to read the story. I ordered on Amazon the first 2 novellas and the second book, which is kind of all mixed together. I'm super excited for those to come, and in a haul, I'll be able to show those to you. But yeah, I love this book. You probably heard so much about it, but it's also linked in my previous video where I did my ultimate 5-star reads, where you can get a little bit more insight on it. But definitely a book I recommend, and it was such a joy to read. I think I read it in a day. All right, then also, obviously, I am on this bandwagon. I feel like recently I've seen a lot of people bringing back out the Chronicles of Narnia, and this is my first time reading the book, although I've watched the movies. But I absolutely love the first 2 books in this, which are The Magician's Nephew and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I absolutely loved it. They were quick reads. You can literally read them in a sitting. They're fun. They're this full of just adventure and just meaning and purpose, and it's just beautiful. I absolutely love these reads. They were 5-star reads for me, and I'm really excited to dive into the next 2 books in this series in November. And then for October, I started, and I'm not quite finished yet, with The Messy Lives of Book People by Phaedra Patrick. Now, I definitely have a little bit of a niche that I want to develop with my library, because I do have a hope of having a library in the future of 1,000 books. I believe that's the number of a library. But I have a little niche I want to form, which is having multiple books about libraries, books about librarians, just anything and everything that concerns books. I want those in my book library. And right here, I have several of those. I also have several that I've already finished, but this is one I've started. Now, what I can say about this book is that it's interesting enough to not DNF it and not to not finish it, but I feel like it's lacking something that I wish it had. I wish it had a slight bit more of drama. I wish there was a little bit more tension. I feel like it's just going kind of linear. There's nothing else kind of happening in the story, but it follows a famous author who has now died, who has left her maid, who is now her understudy, kind of her personal assistant, the job of finishing her last book in her big, huge series, her 20th book. And it just follows the maid now trying to figure out, why did she leave the responsibility to me? How can I interconnect all the little bits and pieces of her life, the mystery and all the the things she would just, hide away beneath, into making this story a bestseller for her audience, who is looking forward to it, all the while keeping a secret that she has passed until the publication date and the release of the book. So, I mean, it's interesting enough to see why. I just wish there was a bit more drama, especially with the maid and her family. I feel like it would have been much more interesting to see tension growing there. It's a little bit, I think I like those bits, but then it just goes back to just her complaining about the fact she doesn't know how to write the book. But she's always wanted to be an author, so this is a perfect opportunity. But I don't know. I think it's good enough to finish. I'm glad to have finished it. I'm glad to have it in my collection. Don't necessarily know if it's something that I recommend, but it's good, you know, so there's that book. And then the next book in my October TBR that I am almost done with is the third book in the Ash Princess series. And so far, I can say I'm into the book. I like the book. I still despise the main character like I despised her in the first two books. I think she is the whiniest, brattiest, so unsure of herself human being that I think I've ever read about in my life. But the other characters in this book, the character development that they've encountered has just been exquisite. I absolutely love it. I am very much going to do a complete book trilogy review on this when I finish this. It's really good. I would highly recommend this series, especially if you want something that is like kind of quick to get through. I just think that in that review video, I'll definitely post some pros and cons, my thoughts and my feelings around it. But yeah, this is a book that I'm nearly done with. And then last but certainly not least, the very last book that's going to be in, that is currently in my October TBR list that I don't actually think I'm going to be able to finish. I will get to it. I doubt I'm going to be able to finish it. Is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, or Shannon. This is a really beautiful book, but she thick. Okay, I believe this baby has, hold on. I'm going to tell you, this book has 804 pages of thickness. The second book is coming out next year, I think in February. It's a fantasy novel, and I will read you the back of it because it's just a lot. It says, the House of Berthnet has ruled Ainz for thousands of years. Still unwed, Queen Sobran the Ninth must conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction, but assassins are getting closer to her door. Ed Durin is an outsider at court. Though she has risen to the position of lady-in-waiting, she is loyal to the hidden society of mages. Ed keeps watchful eye on the sovereign, secretly protecting her with forbidden magic. Across the dark sea, Tine has trained to become a dragon rider since she was a child, but is forced to make a choice that could see her life unravel. Meanwhile, the divided East and West refuse to parley, and forces of chaos are rising from their sleep. Still have absolutely no clue what the book is about, but I thought it was pretty. It looked exciting, but it's intimidating because she's thick. But I'm super excited to get into this book. Definitely whenever I finish it, probably, maybe no, I don't know, because I have a pretty decent chunk of books for November. So I'm hoping by the end of the year, I can squeeze this in between because I definitely want to get it done so that I can read the second book in this series, which I also think is going to be quite big. But yeah, that is definitely a gigantic book. And that is the last book in my October TBR list. The books that I wanted to read, extra books that weren't necessarily on my list that I liked, books like DNF'd, books I haven't quite yet finished or gotten to. But I am super glad that you guys clicked on this video yet again. I would really love if you could comment down below what were some of the books you read this month. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them down below in the comments. And don't forget to give it a like, thumbs up, subscribe, stay a while. I would love it so much. Hit your notification bell so you can be notified every single time I post a video. And without further ado, I'll catch you in my next video. Bye guys.